Hello everyone. Since this class is all about theories of family studies, we're going to start off by talking about what theories are and why they are important in any scientific field, but also in the family studies discipline specifically. So here's some questions to think about to start us off. First of all, how do we know what we know about families? Also, what are some limitations of that knowledge? Are these new, or are there new or different ways of thinking about family issues? And how do we make sense of new problems that families are facing today that didn't exist in the past? Today we're going to focus more on these first two questions, a little bit more abstract stuff about how theories are developed. Most of the rest of the course is going to focus on questions 3 and 4 and how we make sense of the world around us. So, how do we know what we know? To kind of get things started a little bit, this very question goes back to a field called epistemology, which is the study of investigating the nature, origins, methods, and limits of knowledge. And there are three main questions, at least three main questions that exist in this field. Those are, what is knowing? What does it mean to know something? How do we know what we think we know? And how useful is that knowledge that we know? This is really where theories come in, because theories help us organize our knowledge in meaningful and useful ways. So let's start with a little thought activity. Take a look at this picture and think to yourself, who are these people and what are they doing? What information are you able to gather about them just from this picture alone? And what additional information do you need? Go ahead and take a minute to think about that. Your answers to these questions give some indication of your own theory about families and about people. It may not be a very formalized or well-studied theory, but it's a theory nonetheless. So what then is the purpose of theory? The purpose of theory essentially is to try and understand and explain the why and the how beyond what we already know from our data. So you've got some information out there. Theories help us organize it in a way that helps us explain all of those somewhat disconnected points of information. We are essentially in need of explanations. So we're constantly trying to define things, explain things. We constantly trying to find reasons for why this happened or that happened. And in terms of the scientific process and understanding families from a scientific point of view, theories help us organize the information that we collect about families and about individuals and put that into a concise, not always simple, sometimes very complex, but organized way of understanding. Essentially, the purpose of theory is to help us explain behavior, predict behavior, and understand interactions among family members. So here are a few questions that you may have asked in the course of your studies and that have been asked by other family science researchers. Why do people cohabit instead of marry? Why do people get divorced? How do we define family? Who is in a family and who is not in a family? Why are some parents drug addicts or alcoholics? And how does that impact their children? And why do some people have lots of one-night stands and non-committal relationships? These are all questions that require data or information to answer. They also require theories in order to organize that information and develop a systematic, rational answer to that particular question. In your reading, your authors wrote that we all theorize, whether we are aware of it or not, in attempting to understand our observations and experiences. And this is especially true of us in family studies and human development. We're all hopefully trying to understand our own lives, our own families, our own relationships, and we all develop little theories along the way. This class is going to focus on broader, bigger theories that have been developed to try to understand as many families as possible. So let's talk about the process of theory and theorizing for just a minute. The authors of your reading for this week broke it down into these 7 steps. First, there's intuition and awareness of ideas, simply noticing things that happen and that appear to occur together. That tends to lead to the development of hunches or guesses and ideas about how things are linked. So maybe you've observed particular interaction repeatedly between, say, a mother and child, and you start to think, maybe what that mom is doing is influencing a child in a particular way, for good or bad. In order to determine if your hunch is correct, scientists and theorists conduct empirical research. Empiricism is the practice of collecting data, collecting information through observation of some kind, and studying it systematically. So empirical research is basically all the journal article research that you've read. It's collecting data, whether that's, and putting it into numbers in some way, or themes of some kind, and seeing what those numbers and correlations lead you to. From that empirical research, often new ideas are born, but not all ideas or concepts are linked just yet. So you conduct lots of different studies, and you see maybe some similar patterns across multiple different studies, that different kinds of behaviors affect, let's say parental behaviors affect children's outcomes, but you haven't put the whole puzzle together yet. After you've done lots of different studies and developed lots of different ideas, these concepts are created and revised theoretically in a way that provides structure to already existing associations. So you've gathered all this data, and you've started to put together some ideas, and then you start to build it into a theory about how these concepts or behaviors or interactions are associated with one another. This develops into a growing understanding of the complexity of associations, particularly in social sciences, but also in pretty much every other science. Ideas and associations between one concept and another are very complex. It's not just hierarchical. One thing leads to another thing, leads to another thing, leads to another thing. Processes tend to be cyclical, so one thing influences something else, and that influences that first thing in return. So parental behavior influences child behavior, which in turn influences the parental behavior. And so it's this web of all kinds of different interactions among complex parts. As a better understanding of all these complex associations developed, then the theory emerges as a tool to understand, explain, and give meaning to this data that's been collected. So the theory is really the organizing tool for understanding all of the data that's been collected. It can also work in the reverse, where a theory is developed and then to try to organize an understanding of different concepts, and then that theory is tested to see if it is correct or not. So this process itself isn't linear. It repeats itself in various forms as theories are devised, developed, tested, revised, changed, new ideas are discovered and added to the theory, and either challenge the theory and disprove the theory, or else support the theory and develop it further. One thing that's important in terms of all theories is that theory is explicit. It's difficult to have a useful theory if we're not exactly sure what it is that we're talking about. So theory needs to be very specific, and the use of theory also needs to be very specific and precise. So as we go forward throughout the semester, you'll need to be very careful about the way you use language in describing particular theories, because what means one thing in one theory might mean something slightly different in another. And the words you use have a powerful impact on the meaning that is created. This, by the way, applies to one of the theories that we will be talking about later in the semester, symbolic interactionism, that talks specifically about how meaning is created, and it's through shared use of symbols. Anyway, so we'll leave things right there. The next lecture or set of slides will focus more on this process of theory and theorizing, and what theory is used for in scientific research.